Good morning again. It's not even 5. I got up at 3:30, 3:29 to be exact. And I'm looking at an image of the ugliest house in Boston's Back Bay. No, Boston's Com Ave, according to one architect. Breckenridge, I think his name is, or Beckwith or something. Anyway, he decided that this Victorian structure was the ugliest on the entire street. And the one next to it, I think, is far uglier, but that looks like it's more modern. So, but anyway, I had this idea that perhaps I could create a monogram of 2 letters that were based essentially on the structure itself and the 2 occupants or owners of that floor and the back half of that floor. Is that how that works? Yes. And the person that owns the top floor owns the front half. So they expanded to have 1.5 floors. And their names are Ben and Val. And I thought making a B and a V in an architectural sort of manner, Gothic manner, would be fun. And my first attempt, which you sort of see here, was not making me smile as much as I think it should. So I'm just going to look along with you at the elements that I can play with. And because this building is weird, I'll give it that. Especially these things, these stone what do you call those things? Window shades or awnings, stone awning, sort of sticking out. That's really an interesting design. And it may not be what he found so ugly. I mean, if I had to pick the ugliest part of this house, I think it would be this little dollopy thing right there. That's just, it looks like it's made of plastic and it's just glued on. It doesn't have a sense of, I don't know, it's just funny. It's like it was squirted out of a toothpaste tube or something. Sometimes you see modern furniture that rather than having things carved into it, it has stuff nailed on the top of it, and it's supposed to look fancy. And carving is more complicated than nailing or super gluing or staple gunning. So anyway, let me just figure out the parts of this that are sort of fun. And one of them, unfortunately, is that part, because that is an element of this house. It has these trefoil-like tops of the windows here with these little notches out of the bottom. It has the overhanging awnings, and it has these little inset rondelles that are in a square hole, a rondelle in a square hole, and we have this scallop-shaped, peaked, leafy kind of a thing. What do they call that? Well, anyway. And then it has these little carved square bits up there, or circular bits in there, and then some fanciness going on up here. So it's a weird, yes, it's weird. I'll give it that. it has lots of extra three-dimensional bits that maybe most houses of this era don't have or something. The weirdest thing are these things. So this element, I think, has to be part of my monogram. Now I can rotate it, I can morph it, I can cut and paste these elements to put together into here. For example, here, this little part is that part. The V is this part. The B is the top and the bottom of the B are made of that shape. And then this kind of thing happens over here a little bit. So let me just start over, and I'm going to try to look at my picture while with X-ray vision because I can't see it because of the light. I see it also has these big, it has three, these are weird. This little bit right here. It's kind of neat. Normally you'd see like twice as many of these things. But they zoomed it in. And did they make this the same size as that for Unity? No. They just randomly chose that and that. And let's add a little bit of a dollop right there, just for fun. It's always interesting to see the borderline between two adjoining houses, townhouses, because sometimes, you know, these ceilings are just a little bit taller. So this building is just a little bit taller than that one, and the window lines don't match up. And like this one, I guess the floors look like they're the same as this, but they have tinier windows, so it looks weird. Okay, so let's go back to our B and a V. And so, you know, how do I make a, you know, this is how I start. I think of a B and a V. How are they going to interact? And you sort of have to, you don't see them side by side like this because that's not very intimate. They need to be infligente, whatever the word is. They have to be intertwining. And if I put a B here and a V like this, I get areas that are really, really tight. And I don't like them when they're really, really tight. Do you like them when they're tight? Yeah, I bet you do. You like it when it's tight. Well, I don't. I like it loose. I like there to be a lot of space in between the areas. So things usually have to morph to make room for that. I personally, I also like to have at least some elements of both letters be parallel, because that sort of joins them on a mission. And so on the one I did yesterday, which I still like that design, I had the B and the V, and I offset them. My plan was to offset them thus. So the V was taller than the B, and it went like this. And this sort of had a curl to sort of allow it to be on a slant like that a little bit more. Now I could have slanted the B like this, and maybe that might work for some design, but because this is architectural, I think the B should be a nice vertical line, and these are rounded, or they can be squared off. But I want the B to be that way. And then the V, now I could have the V do this, but I don't like, that's not as nice to me as this. So I'm going to have the B be here, taller. For evenness, if I did it this way, B and a V, not only is the B higher, it's also the thing you see first if you're reading left to right, and that gives too much emphasis on the B. So this might work for some other kind of a thing. Let's say I was doing a florist, a monogram for a florist. Maybe have this look like it's growing up like a tree might be a good idea, or a landscape architect or an arborist or something. I might imply sort of growth coming up like that. But in this case, because I know I have to deal with architecture, and because I want the B and the V to be equal, even though, so if the B you see first, the V is taller. So I've decided that that's the rule that I want to follow. So let's get another piece of paper. So here's my plan is to have it look like B and a V. Now I can play with the sizes of the bowls of the B and the V. I can play with the angle of that V. These parts are going to be kind of set in stone. What they look like, I don't know, but they're going to be parallel. That's my shtick. The bowl of the B, the two bowls of the B, it could be big on top, small on the bottom. But that, if the V is going to be down here, that's going to make this area too dense. So by making the B smaller on top, where there's less stuff going on, the B larger on the bottom, then I've got room to play down here. Now, do I want, so I've made that decision. I have two decisions made now. Small B, large B. Large bowl, small bowl, large bowl. Small, big, parallel, diagonal. Okay, next. The bowls. Now, there's nothing that's really rounded on this thing, but there are some conventions that people that, oh, and I also can, sorry, the B could be made of a line and a 3 like this, or it could be connected. And that's something that well, I'll explain why I might want it to be connected rather than open. If it was open, the V does this. So the V goes over the B, and then it goes under the B here. Right? You or I almost always interweave them over, under, under, over. Every line goes over one and under the other. So the B is under the V, then it's over the V, and it's under the V, over the V. The V is over the B and under the B. If I put this in here, we're going to have a slight problem. Over, under, and what is this going to be? Over. Right? Over, under, over, under, over. But if you read the B, you see under, under, and that screws it up. But because the B has two, you have to talk to a topologist in mathematics, not theory, to figure out the what's actually happening here, and I don't have time to learn that to explain it to you, so I'll go to some other channel. So anyway, this is what I am going to do anyway, just because this looks more interwoven than this. This looks like the V could fall out. This looks tighter together, and I want that to look that way, just because. So now I've made decisions about the interweaving, the decisions about the size of the bowls, the vertical parallelism, and the overlapping. Okay, that's essentially the math that I have to follow. And the spaces, you know, seem, there's nothing that's too tight like it was here. And now I can decide how I want to, you know, turn this into something that looks pretty. I could sharpen the edges here. You know, I don't want to mistake the B-ness or have the B-ness go away. I could have this V go up like that, couldn't I? Maybe I might like that better. B. Here. It still looks like a B. That's kind of a nice little bit right there. Just because it sort of turns it into a square more than this. This sort of flies off in a direction I don't like, so maybe the V can have a heavier ending rather than just a small little curlicue like I originally had done. Maybe that's a way to go. Looking back at the original here, which I can't see very well because the light is blocking it. Oh, you're seeing this sideways, aren't you? Well, too bad. Hold your head to the side because I can't have a vertical thing on YouTube very well. So above the windows we have that little bit, and we also have this little bit, and then we've got that fancy thing on top, and then we have this thing there. And how is this going to work? If I were to use that shape for the inside of the B, if I do that for the exterior of the B, that part of the B, what can I play with? I have the triangular peak of the roof. Could do that. You know, where you have, here's the peak of the roof, and you have that, and then they have three little rondelles like this. So that's one way to make the B. It's not a very nice way to make it, but that's the way that it could be made. Another way is to use this part, and here we have our squared end, And the squared end is just meant to make it look somewhat architectural rather than floral. Here we have this bit that's been chewed into this. So I have a sort of, and this shape that's cut into something, that's a convention that's used in monograms of this era, the same era, the Victorian era. So this actually has a historic basis for it. So that might be a way to fix this part of the B right here. And I could add a rondelle there. Or I could put something up here and here and here, but have this be open. And I would do it on both of these, both of them. I say both of them a lot because one of my neighbors overheard a conversation, or maybe it was her family, and they, rather than both of them, both of them, both, BOFADEM, both of them. I think people from Medford say that. MEDFORD, Medford. Medford. You're from Medford. Both of them. Both of them from Medford. So that might be how I do that one. Now, let's see here. Let's go back to the top. We also have this little bit there where this isn't it could be a shape where the B looks like that. Sort of arched, vaulted arch thing. Initially I had used that up here to be the top of the V rather. And I may use it there again. And then where I did have that scallop above the door be the side of the V, I may omit that entirely. Or I could put that here and maybe that arched thing here. I don't know. I've got to figure that out. See, this is the fun part and the hard part of doing this kind of work, because there's so many different choices. There's many wrong ways, and there's just as many right ways to do something, and one might be righter than the other. Here we have another shape with a rondelle. See, now this is a... Now, could I do this on the bottom and that other one on the top? What would that look like? Or is that going to make the B look too different? Like there's... So this could be cut in, this could be, applied on the top of something that's slightly curved, like this. That might work for the bowls of the B. Because I'm borrowing a little bit from all over the house. There's these little square bits there. What does this have? This has little notches out on the thing below, so don't want to do that. I could have that be filled in and then have those little notches. Making it look a little fancier. If this were a real client rather than a real friend, I don't know what I would do. If this is a real job I had to actually finish for someone, I would be thinking more of how it would actually be engraved. Eventually, if it were to be engraved, all of these mushy pencil lines that I'm making would be exact lines made with cross-hatching or stippling, rather hatching or stippling, or simple line work or thick line work. All of these things are used to make areas darker or differentiated from each other. The B might have cross-hatching to make it grayish. Pretend this is black ink in here. And the V might have stipple pattern to make it look different. It might have horizontal lines versus vertical lines, or it could have crosshatched lines. So there's this kind of stuff is what this has to be translated to in order for it to be engraved. So that's in the back of my mind as well. It shouldn't bother me too much, but it bothers me a little, because I know that's on the texture pot is simmering on the back burner, but it's simmering. I can smell the odor of it or hear the bubbles of its simmeringness. It's on a low boil, so that's in the background of my little head. And oh dear, I just noticed that these things inside of this are not just rondelles, they're little flowers. God, it is stupid. It's a little plant-like thing. It has a little stem and a big fat old bloom on it, rather than just a design. This building also has weird stuff going on here. This is everything about it is weird. Whether it's ugly is another matter, but it is in fact weird. It has these little spindly bits here, these little lathed things going on as well, which I included in the first drawing I did. So anyway, I just thought that I would show you the kinds of things that I deal with when I'm creating a monogram. Sometimes it's a very basic looking monogram, but I want it to look nice, and I'll take a existing font like shape. So quite often I have to do that, where someone will say, here's our wedding invitation, we're using this font, we really love it, can you make a monogram to match? And yes, I could just take a type B and a V and select it and put it on top of each other and call it a day, and laugh all the way to the bank with their check. And this might make 20% of my clients happy, but it's not going to make me happy. That's the important thing. So I have to tweak things. I have to make the B a little taller. I have to make the bowls a little bigger, the V a little bit tilted. I have to do things to make it work so it's balanced. And so again, if Ben and Val were real clients and they wanted to have this thing be eventually created into a monogram they can use on their stationery, I would continue and come up with other sketch ideas for how I would finish it, and what elements of their house, the architecture of their building, would I want to include and what would I want to omit. And that's the fun part. And it's full of various options, and I like to give clients choices. We can do A, B, or C. Can you show us D, E, and F too? And then sometimes I have to do 3 other things or 1 other thing, or they'll say, "Can you do this and this?" And I know that it won't work, but they don't know that it won't work. But I do it anyway, and they say, "Well, that doesn't work." And I could have said, "I told you so," but sometimes I do tell them that. I had a client that wanted to make an I and an S as a monogram. "It'll look like a $sign," I said. Without even doing it, I knew it was going to look like this. "Well, we want to see what it looks like anyway." So I did it, and I continued to refine it because they asked me to continue to refine it, and I continued to refine it, and then they finally said, "It looks like a $sign," and I said, "Yeah, I know." I told you that 5 emails ago. So sometimes, though, you do have to show the client all of the permutations, so they can see that some of them don't work, or some of them look like $signs, or some of them are just lopsided, or whatever. But I do have some clients that I do a lot of work for, middlemen, and they hire me to make a monogram, and I've already made 10 monograms for them, and they know now, at least I hope they know now, not to ask me to do something I haven't shown them, because I thought about it already, or I've done a monogram with those same letters before, and I remember. I can't automatically look at 2 letters and say that one's not going to work. I don't have that superpower, but I do have a lot of hundreds and hundreds of monograms under my belt, and most of the work is this: how are they going to overlap? Turning them into buildings and making them into flowers and cross-hatching and doing this, that, and the other, that's easy compared to this. This is the most important and the hardest part, is coming up with a balance that you think is going to be nice. Where was I going with that? I don't know. I'm still having fun with my new best friend. This is that Wall Ever Sharp that has exactly the right kind of nib in it, except it's a Schaefer nib by mistake. It's Schaefer number 3 nib. I know that there's an Wall Ever Sharp nib that is exactly like this, or 99.9% exactly like this, that I will eventually find, if I live that long, to put in this pen. I may already have one in a different pen, and I can shove it into this one. But right now, the Schaefer is it's exactly the kind of nib I want for this pen. So delicate. So lightweight. The pen itself it seems like it's made of helium, because it feels so light in my hand. And it requires me, in my mind, to have a nib that's the same way. There you go. Bye.